Since I last shared an update, God swept in miraculously and took us to a new hotel where we have stayed for over a week. It was a cozy, cute place where God met with me often to prepare me for all that was ahead. God showed me that the next leap of faith that He takes us into is going to confront so many of my fears. But He also promised to rescue us as our champion hero to save the day with undefeatable love. He said that He would cause His love to flood out the dry areas where there was fear, so that I could be free of those worries and embrace the joy of living under His wings of refuge. Just as there are times when the only way to get through something is by a leap of faith, there are also times when the only way to get through to the life that God has promised is to walk through the fire of facing fears and being so insanely uncomfortable that it is painful to even think about doing. It is like going through the travail of labor to push out the baby that you've been wanting to hold more than anything else. It's a pivotal moment when God asks us to trust Him where He leads us through the dark valleys and places we would rather not want to go. Way before God started me on this faith-living journey, He gave me an encounter of something that I would go through. He thrust me into the deepest waters, and I went really deep down into the blue ocean. I had to focus on the peace of God to get through it because it was so terrifying to go through. I was literally being delivered of all my fears all at once in a monumental moment. But when I came back up to the surface, I was in my destined calling, and I was radiating in the fullness of what God created me to do and in His power as well. It was a bittersweet thing. I had to walk through something terrifying in order to step into the dreams that God placed in my heart. On the other side of fears is where I needed to go, but I didn't want to go through them. However, I wanted to get to where I dreamed to go. I have read that drowning feels like your lungs are on fire, and that is what this prophetic encounter was like. I was pushed into my deepest fears, and it was like giving birth to calming ocean jewels in the midst of hot flames. None of my fears happened to me, but having to face them was quite painful. Yet just as gold must go through the fiery furnace to be refined, there are times that the only way to get through to the destination of our dreams is to face our fears and the discomforts of walking through them. It is only then that we know that those fears are lies and not real. That is exactly what God has been preparing me to do, and the thought of walking through it is the most painful part. It is the anticipation that hurts so much, as all the what-ifs and worries flash before my mind. Before God called me to take my kids and go to a hotel with only enough money to cover a few nights, the hardest and most painful part was the anticipation. I had spent hours weeping and begging not to go through it. It was like my own night before going to the cross that was before me. However, there was no pain once I actually walked through it. In fact, it was like all the pain, or fear, I should say, of doing it was all endured in the preparation of dying to myself beforehand. You can read more about that whole journey in a very vivid and exquisite story on my Naked Wings book, and that is at my store page on diamondsfromthedust.com. I went from clinging for dear life to the carpet before we had to go, to waking up with complete peace when it was time to actually walk through it. When I think about what I actually did now that it's over, I'm overwhelmed I did something so bold and dangerous. It was only by the grace of God, because Lord knows I'm too chicken to do something like that naturally. When God asks us to do something that is so terrifying, we actually only taste the pain when we travel through it ahead of time with the worry in our minds. The mind is where the pain of it all comes and goes. Once you finally surrender to whatever God is leading you into, the moment that you cross the Red Sea, there's no fear at all. In fact, you have so much peace and joy that it'll make you laugh that you were ever scared at all. The birth of your promise and destiny is only painful when you are surrendering to trust God and however it would go. One of my biggest flaws is that I'm working with God to correct his overthinking. In fact, on Monday, I literally thought it was Tuesday because I was overthinking so much about what is coming, and I went far ahead of God and skipped over a whole day. The easiest way to go through something that terrifies you is to not think at all. Just trust God and go. It is a real leap of faith in our heart. Walk with him and stay behind him every step of the way. After panicking all day yesterday, God finally interrupted my frantic overthinking and he said, "Let me take the lead." It's funny how something like surrendering control can be so hard to do. I went into a whole different wrestling match just by going through the process of letting go of control and trusting that God knows best. Learning to trust God and lay down my false sense of self-protection was really a hard thing to do. Yet God has been so kind and loving and gracious. I really believe he chose me to do this intense walk of seeing his miracles because I am so very flawed with weaknesses and in need of Jesus to save me every day. That way I cannot take credit or be confident in my own strength, but I've had to learn to surrender to trusting God for literally everything. Trust is where the fears fade away. Trust is where I can finally breathe when I'm 10 feet underwater and drowning from the anxieties of doing something that's so terrifying to do. The other thing that God told me yesterday was not to run from suffering, but to walk through where he leads and trust him to be the protection that I needed. It's a little funny because my fairy tale dream of my whole life was to have a hero to rescue me and protect me from getting hurt. My all-time favorite romantic love song is Glory of Love from Peter Cetera, I believe, and it's all about a hero and love. But if I'm not willing to expose myself to dangerous seeming places where God leads, then I'm never allowing God to show me that kind of personal and deeply intimate love. We're not safe because of the absence of danger, but because of the presence of God. The same God that protected Moses when he was hidden right in the midst of the crocodiles in a little wicker basket and the papyrus roots. If God can protect Moses and draw him out of many waters, he can most definitely protect us from much less dangerous things. God carried us on eagle's wings to where we are, and I have to trust his plan as we follow this path that he has taken us on. There are some paths that God will lead us through where we will not want to go, but we have to trust God to be our shepherd and to protect us like a little lamb. He only takes the sheep through the valley to reach the bigger pastures on the other side. If I had not allowed Jesus to take me to that hotel, things would be so different. I would never have encountered so many priceless moments of seeing the miracles of God's love. I would not be who I am at this moment. Realistically, I probably would not be alive at all. And if I was alive, I'd be living in a forest or sitting on a side of the road with no comfort or shelter to find rest. God saved us when I walked through that fear, and he never let anything hurtful come to me or my kids. As a matter of fact, he did so much better than I could have ever dreamed or imagined. God lavished us in so much comfort And God was so delicate and loving to meet the sensitive needs of my children too. When God asks us to follow Him into something terrifying or uncomfortable, I've learned firsthand that when you finally walk it out, it's not bad at all. It is in the place where you receive the desires of your heart and all your dreams start to become tangible. It is in the fire that you become who God destined you to be, and all the fears attached to your destined calling are drowned out as you are fully and utterly submerged in the deepest love you've ever known. Always expect the best from God, even when you're trembling inside. He knows you, and He's so very gentle when He knows that you choose to trust Him with your life and the lives of those who matter to you. So don't be resistant to follow Jesus through the scary, dark, and fiery places, because that is where you receive the dreams that you've longed to come to pass. That is where you encounter love like anything else, and where the intimacy of God is formed. They are born in the fire, where God's perfect love protects you from every fear and danger. It's all about trust and being willing to follow Jesus through the unique path that He has made for you. It is being submerged, really submerged, where it all changes. I love you so much. God bless you.